Are you looking to stay connected with the boys over on Beyond the Unknown? Well, check out nicotina.net. There you can join the community under Beyond the Unknown and be able to interact with both Daniel and myself and get access to exclusive content only available on the community at www.nicotina.net. Join the community and be a part of the Beyond the Unknown team today.
And all of a sudden, something came crashing down the hill towards us from up the hill. And it then started to beat on its chest and screech just like a chimpanzee, but a little bit deeper in tone. They had somebody on watch at all times. Everybody else, the smaller ones were sleeping in the center, and the larger ones were on the outside. That's military tactic.
Guys, this is Beyond the Unknown.
Okay, we're live. We're ready when you are.
Hey, guys, good to be here.
All of a sudden, I catch something black in my peripheral.
What happened next?
And then it stands directly up. And by that, I mean on two legs.
And he said that once he did that, he could not see him anymore.
That's incredible.
What I saw looked like a cross between an animal and a human.
It really just kind of shakes it to the core.
Solid black, and it looks to be like it's home.
They saw something that didn't look like human. That sounds terrifying.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Beyond the Unknown. Today, I'm joined by Nick. I'm going to butcher your last name. I know you said it earlier. Nick. Say it
Smearud.
Smearud. There it is. Nick Smearud. And Nick, you had an encounter with a Bigfoot. Is that right?
I would have to say so.
And exactly when was this encounter?
This was about close to 20 years ago now. I'm not sure if I was a freshman or if I was in ninth grade in high school. But yeah, so it was around September 1st because that's when squirrel season starts around here. And me and two friends, Alex and Ross, decided to go squirrel hunting. And we went to what's essentially it's a local shooting range that's like very rarely used. Only a few times a year do people actually use it. And we parked at a driveway that's like right next to it and walked about 1,000 yards past the shooting range and cut up the hill. Well, we got, I don't know, about halfway up this hill, and we were kind of in a clearing that was surrounded by maple trees with a water drainage on the right-hand side of us. And all of a sudden, something came crashing down the hill towards us from up the hill. And it then started to beat on its chest and screech just like a chimpanzee, but a little bit deeper in tone. And I was just, I remember thinking, what the F, what is that? And saying it verbally to my friends. And I was like, all we had was 22s. So we're not taking down anything big.
Right.
And so we basically I was like, follow me. And I ran down into the ditch and we stood by this log and stood back to back with our guns waiting for this thing to charge us. The weird thing about it is we never saw it. It never came into view, but by the sound of it was beating on its chest. It was so loud that you could almost hear it and feel it in your chest. Wow. And the screeching was just very, very loud and very terrifying. And I mean, this thing sounded like if you've ever heard a cow run through a cornfield,
yeah,
it sounded like that. It sounded massive.
So there was no denying its size based on, the sound it was putting out when it moved. You can tell by the sound that it was huge.
Yeah, very large. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time out in the woods. I've been hunting and fishing and camping, hiking for many years, and even at this point for many years. And I've never heard anything like this in the woods. I know what a ruffed grouse sounds like. I know all the animals in the woods around here, and this was nothing like that. This was clearly primate and clearly like a territorial display, like you're not coming any further forward. And based on where it's at, I kind of believe that they knew what guns were, because this was right, I mean, literally a thousand feet behind the shooting range. So they knew what guns were. I mean, if they stayed in that area regularly, then they knew exactly what was going on.
Well, they could
So
definitely hear them. That's for sure. And so, yeah, I'm sure they were familiar with it. And plus, I'm sure they probably seen it as well from a distance.
yeah,
And you said this is about 30 years ago.
20.
20.
I'd have been about 16.
And that's actually fairly recent too, because I mean, a lot of these encounters that we've been hearing happened, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but only 16 years ago. I mean, it goes to show you that these things are still out there. I mean, these things are still existing in the deeper parts of the woods, and they venture out. I mean, they come closer to where humans are at.
This is less than 5 miles from the town line, like literally right on the edge of town. Basically, like a south-facing valley. I honestly, like, I don't remember leaving the woods that day. I don't remember the rest of that entire day. Like, I don't know if there's any truth to the whole infrasound theory, but it was like we never even talked about it again. Like, it was just, I don't know if we were afraid to talk about it or if we just never got around to it, but it was a very traumatic experience.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that with the amount of trauma that you encountered in this encounter, I would imagine that, your mind and your brain kind of goes into like a self-defense where it's like, let's just suppress that because it's only going to have a negative effect on us. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it actually makes it worse. But the fact that you guys were armed, I think, helped a lot as well. I mean, at one point you said you guys moved off to the side and you guys were like kind of back to back holding your 22s. And then so I figure at that point it feels like, the Bigfoot saw what you were doing and pretty much knew that you guys were on the defense as it is. And so maybe that's all he needed to know. He or she needed to know in order to kind of not further pursue, because I feel like if that was a bear, the bear would have kept coming, and it would have been obvious that it's a bear, because the bear doesn't think about, wait, I don't really want them to see me. I want them to know I'm just here. No, it's just going to come and let you know that it's there, even if that means that visually you see the bear. Yeah. And so, and that's why, I think that these things have such a higher level of intelligence, because they can think about, 100%. Because they can think about like, well, okay, I'm going to scare them, but I'm not going to reveal myself, because that's not what we do.
Exactly what I was thinking too. I mean, whatever this thing was, it was intelligent enough to know that it didn't want to be seen, but it wanted us to know that we were not welcome where we were.
Yeah.
And that just screams high intelligence. With all the stories of people getting rocks thrown at them and wood knocks to me is like almost a military tactic. It's giving a sign to another animal or another Bigfoot that's in the area that there's something there that doesn't belong, and that they're not giving out a sign that's immediately noticeable to people or immediately understood.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sure you've probably seen the discovery of the nest sites by the Olympic project.
Yeah.
They stated the way that they had it set up that it was almost like they had somebody on watch at all times, and they had everybody else. The smaller ones were sleeping in the center, and the larger ones were on the outside. That's military tactics. They have a very high level of sophistication of intelligence, and there's no doubt about that in my mind.
Absolutely. And I think that even down, so this is the crazy part about those nests, is that you have the same type of nest structures that you find in Washington, that you do all the way in Australia with the Yowie. And so
they found them in China as well.
Exactly. And this definitely, like, at least for me, this proves that these creatures are related. They're maybe not the same exact form of each other, but they are closely related in the sense that they stem from the same bipedal hominid that that traveled from most likely China or Russia up across the land bridge
The
down
land bridge, yeah.
Alaska into Canada into North America, and then the other ones went down down by Singapore and those islands down there, the Indonesian islands, and crossed over into Australia. No, because they're doing the same exact things. The tree knocks, the throwing of the rocks, the making
Absolutely.
noise to scare you off, the structure of the nest, the tree structures that they do, how they make these big pyramid shaped, with the roots of the trees. It's incredible what they do, and it's one thing if, like, okay, they're doing it in the Pacific Northwest, or they're doing it in the Midwest, they're doing it in the South, but they're doing it all over the world because
Yeah.
they are of a similar race of beings, and it's typical behavior of from their brain capacity and how they communicate with one another. In fact, I was talking about this on a previous podcast. Like, for me at least, I feel like the tree structures that they build are not signs that, like, hey, this is my territory, get out. I believe that those are actually built as a way of communicating with one another, that if another Bigfoot moves into that area, it lets them know that there are others in this area. So if they encounter each other, they don't. It's not about a fight. It's not about, like, dominating, your territory with one another. I think it's more of like an invitation to say, hey, there's others here. And so, like, if you encounter another Sasquatch or Bigfoot, don't be alarmed because we're here. We're letting you know that we're here.
I would agree. I do think that there's some territorial nature to it. I think that, like, they're kind of marking their territory, but I don't know if it's like, I haven't heard a lot of stories of them fighting. I've been listening to podcasts and stories and encounters for years, and you don't hear a lot of them fighting each other.
You don't
Which
at all.
I think they have, like, family groups, and they're kind of like spread apart fairly. Must have a fairly large territory to support an animal that big. But I think it's kind of like an indicator of how many are in the family group, and how many, like, if there's breeding age males, like there's some of the ones where they have trees that are stuck in upside down.
Yeah.
And, like, big, very large trees, and that's like, that tree didn't just fall over like that and stick itself into the ground. Like, that was put there. And that I think is a an adolescent male showing off, trying to maybe attract a mate, trying to show how strong he is, which is all very well documented in gorilla behavior. And that's the thing that strikes me, is you see so many things that are parallel with other primate behavior in the United States, in America, and all over the other parts of the world, where these, I mean, even in Britain, like, Britain has the story of the Woodwoes, which is, I mean, almost identical to Bigfoot stories. So, I mean, and there's even, like, with Vietnam, there's stories of the rock apes, the stone apes that were attacking or trying to scare away soldiers in Vietnam, which is like, you have stories that are connected from across the world to what people have reported and what's been seen on camera. It's almost, it seems laughable to me that people just continue to deny it. Like when I saw the Joe Rogan episode with Dr. Meldrum, I was really disappointed in the way that they treated him.
Well, and that's the thing with Joe, is that, he is not a firm believer in Bigfoot anymore. I think a lot to do with it with the special that he did, but that's his opinion, and he's allowed to have that opinion. But I don't think he's a huge believer like he used to be. And, like I said, that's up to him. But I mean, based on the testimonies that we have heard, even on this podcast, I'm a firm believer that these creatures exist, especially in the deeper parts of the world. We recently had on, he was actually a family friend His name is Sergio Ramirez, and he had an encounter in along the coast above Santa Cruz in on the west coast of California. And it's funny because I was talking with another podcaster, Matt Knapp of Bigfoot Crossroads, and he was even saying that he's like, this is before I even talked to Sergio, but Matt and I were talking one time, and he said, it's weird because like you never really hear any stories about Bigfoot existing on the coastline. But then recently you hear the story of Claire, who was on Sasquatch Chronicles, who talked about seeing a family of Bigfoot come out and into the water along the coastline back in 1989. And then fast forward to last weekend when we talked to Sergio, and he had an encounter near the coast in Santa Cruz, which is about a couple hours north of where Claire was at. And again, having an encounter with a Bigfoot closer to the coast. And so at least you can argue that back in 1989, right? Was that like almost 30 years ago, a little more than 30 years ago,
Yeah.
these creatures existed along the coastlines of California. Now, are they still there now? I don't know, but there's a good chance that
they still are.
They probably still are, but there's a good chance that they were there. And maybe now their numbers have receded back because of the expansion along the coastline of residential and construction in general and farmland. So it could be a case where at one point they were prevalent in that area.
I think there's a definite possibility that they're still there because there's still food there. Anywhere where there's food, they're going to be, and they own the night like the American military owns the night with night vision. Like, they are not afraid of us at night at all. They're the only time that people that they get scared of people is when they get almost run over by cars, or in that one instance where they actually did hit it with a vehicle, and then it comes chasing after the car afterwards.
Yeah,
like they're so much better in the woods than we are. Like they did you see the study that was done about chimpanzees and primates recognizing trail cameras?
Really?
Like,
well, it doesn't surprise me too. Yeah, because I would imagine that the Bigfoot can see the infrared lights that are coming off of that.
And they know the woods so well. They know every area that they live so well that they pick up on even scents and, oh, something's different about this. What's that thing hanging on the tree over there? And they avoid them almost immediately. It takes like something like 3 or 4 times, and then when one of them notices it, he tells it to the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Like, they did a study, and they within a matter of like 3 days after the first chimp or gorilla noticed the camera, they would avoid it completely, like the plague. And that's a high level of intelligence. Like,
well, not only that, but it's a high level of intelligence, but it's also an ability to see, the infrared lights that we can't. And so if you could see that, you would know, like, okay, wait, what's that? I'm not going to go near that thing. And I don't think it's a matter of like, oh, that's a camera. I think it's more like they see it and they go, what the hell is that? Oh, I'm out of here. That
doesn't belong here. Something else put that here.
Exactly.
And they know they've been around us long enough to know to know smells and know, not necessarily what technology is, but understand that people put it there and it's not something from nature.
Exactly. So let's jump back to your story. I wanted to ask you, when you guys were hiking out there because you were squirrel hunting, and when you heard this thing all of a sudden come running down the hill towards you, what was your first thought about what it could be as you heard it coming in your direction?
I remember thinking, what the F, like, and saying it out loud, like, what the F is that? And, it really never dawned on me till quite a few years later of what it was. Like, we were just freaked out, like, but, and immediately in my mind, I was like, is that a Bigfoot or is that a chimpanzee? What am I hearing here? What is coming at us? But it happened so fast that you don't have time to think. Like, I didn't even really it never really registered, right, like what was going on. Just that something was coming at us, and that it sounded like a primate, and that it was not happy that we were there.
I mean,
Like,
the fact that you heard it beat its chest, it's not like people have gorillas or apes on a regular basis where they're letting them out into the wild, and then
no,
like a cat where it's going to come back home. I mean,
I
that's
live
what I'm saying.
in a very small town of less than 1,000 people. If somebody had a chimpanzee or a pet monkey, we would know about it. Like it would be the talk of the town. There's no escaped primates in Northeast Iowa. There's no escaped gorillas. Like, this thing was there, and it's been there for a long time. One of the roads along, or there's another, like a dead end road further along that particular road that we were on. It's called Columbus Road, but the dead end road is called Wildcat Canyon. And like, I know that they mimic other animals. I know that they mimic owls. They mimic us.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I kind of wonder if that Wildcat Canyon isn't in somewhat some way a reference to something, trying to scare people away, or what the whole story is. But I mean, there's this area is so heavily wooded. Like, if you saw those pictures that I sent, any direction you look, it's solid trees. Like, it's like green carpet everywhere around. Like, and most of the time there's nobody out in the woods. Like, I go up on the hill, right? It's directly behind my house, like less than 30 feet away. And it's rare if I see somebody up there. I think I've ran into somebody 3 times in the dozens of times that I've been up there. And there's a biking trail, like a mountain bike trail up on this hill, and hardly ever see anybody up there. I went up there the night of the solar eclipse, or solar flare.
Yeah.
And me and my buddy got stalked by a cougar. Like, and I know that's what it was, because predators have forward-facing eyes, and they're separated by a large distance. Big white eyes, and it followed us 3 different times. We saw it.
That's crazy. 3 different times.
Yeah, we never saw it. Actually, never got close enough to it. Like, when we saw the eyes, we would immediately go towards it, and never got close enough to see it actually, other than just the eyes. But this thing followed us as we were walking around the hilltop, and we would be shining the flashlights around, and eventually we'd see the eyes again, and it'd be staring right at us. Keep going further along the trail, another few hundred feet, and it was there again, over and over again. And when we got to the bottom of the hill, something was like breaking sticks and stepping around in the woods right behind our house, right behind my house. Like,
wow.
So there's wildlife here that's like, I mean, it's abundant. It's very abundant. It's very thick. You can't see more than 50 feet. And clearly, like, so if they're trying to run away, they have no problem escaping you. They have no problem hiding from you.
Let me pull up the pictures right now so we can kind of show those off to everybody. Let me see. Can I share this screen? Yeah, I think I can. I want to make sure I don't have any personal information showing.
That's all right.
Well, I mean, for anyone watching at home, I mean, look at that. There's trees everywhere.
Yep.
Look at that. Beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it around here. There's not a lot of places like it. It's part of the driftless region of Iowa, so it's very hilly.
It's perfect for them to live too.
If you look at that picture there,
yeah,
that hillside that they're focusing on is the
over
same.
Here?
Yeah, there. If you see at the corner, right where the corner is there on that road, there's a road that goes off to the right, and that's the road that the shooting range is on. So about 2 miles, maybe 2.5, 3 miles down that road, and then off to the south is where we had our encounter.
Oh wow!
So you can see how dense it is. And I took some more pictures today. I actually was up on the hill. I got real close to a buck in velvet today. There,
yeah?
I mean, and it's like I don't know. I like hiking, and it's good for me. It's good for you to get out and into nature.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But you can see how, like, the area that you live in, yeah, it's very densely wooded. So it's
extremely.
not like there's like a, it's not like you're living in New York City or whatnot.
No.
And so, these things, they're out there, and so we talked about, how you felt when it came towards you. You said you heard it beat its chest, and you
Yeah.
could definitely tell that it was the chest and not like
It
a
was
tree
a
knock or.
no. It was beating on its chest. It was fast. It was rapid. It was thump 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 thump. Like, I mean, just like you hear a gorilla do, like
Yeah.
identical to a gorilla. But I mean, the it sounded like a very large cavity that it was pounding on, like very big.
Yeah.
Um,
Like if it was a
and
man, like you'd be able to tell that what he's banging on is not as big as let's say a gorilla with a barrel chest.
exactly. If he was a man, he was massive, and he did the best chimp impression I've ever heard in my life.
So this thing
Like,
comes crashing down, starts beating his chest, and at this point, you guys are frozen, staring up at the hill, looking at densely wooded area, not really knowing exactly where it's coming from, and just knowing that it's coming from a certain direction of the hill.
it was no further than 40 yards away.
Wow.
Because we're in a kind of a clearing on this hillside, and there's a pretty dense tree line right in front of us, a bunch of maple trees in a line, and it had to be just behind that. Like, it was close.
And what time of the year was this?
But around September 1st, I'm not sure. I think that it was the leaves were still on the tree, so it wasn't much later than that.
Uh-huh.
I know that it was at least September 1st because that's when squirrel season starts.
Yeah.
So, but we always try to get out fairly early on.
What time of the day was this?
Afternoon, probably about 2 o'clock or so.
Mm-hmm. And since this has happened, have you ever gone back to that location ever again?
I've driven by there, but I've never went in the woods there again. I'm afraid to. I'm legitimately afraid to, and I spent a lot of time in the woods, and there's not much that scares me. Like, I literally just told you, we walked up on a cougar and then went towards it.
Yeah.
But this is something different. This could legitimately kill you very easily. Like, whatever it was is like legitimately large and terrifying. Like, I have an electric bike now, and I've been like plotting on going out there and taking some pictures, but I'm afraid to go back in the woods out there.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't go back out there unless I had a firearm or people with me, maybe both. But when you guys kind of were back to back with your 22s, what happened after that? You said it just stopped altogether.
Yeah, it just kind of it was shaking brush, and it was like snapping branches, but it was like, I don't know how long like the whole encounter took place. I feel like it couldn't been more than a minute or two.
Mm-hmm.
But it just kind of stopped. Like, it just kind of went quiet, like it retreated, but we never heard it like walk away. Like, it was still like maybe standing there just like watching us. Like, I honestly don't know. Like, I couldn't tell you. Like, you don't look at your clock, and we didn't have cell phones back then. And so, like, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes, but the sound kind of just subsided. And I remember we basically just got out of there as fast as we could.
Yeah. And that's probably exactly what he wanted you to do as well. I mean, one of the tactics that we've, heard about is that, for one, they stand very still, but two is that one of their tactics of camouflage is to lay down on the ground and basically blend in with the environment around them. And it could have been the case where he was charging down there and then got down on the ground where you guys couldn't even see him, or he was behind a tree, one or the other. But I'm sure once he saw you guys, wait, look around, and then bolt out of there. I mean, at that point, he was like, all right, cool, they're leaving. I'm going to get out of here too. But like I'm saying, go ahead. I'm not positive that it didn't come out of a tree, or if it wasn't up in a tree. Yeah, because I mean, that's like sentry behavior. It sounded like either it came crashing down the hill through the brush, or it came down out of a tree, like just behind the wall of trees in front of us. And when it came crashing down initially, could you feel the footsteps of this creature like as it came crashing down?
You could hear branches cracking. I don't think I could feel the footsteps, but like if we were, probably a good 40 yards away at least. So I don't know that we would have felt the footsteps, but
Yeah.
the percussion from the it beating on its chest, you could definitely feel, and you could feel the noise from the scream. Like you could feel it.
So the scream, let's talk about that. I mean, you said it was more of like a screech as opposed to like a roar.
Yeah, it was a screech, like just like a chimpanzee. Like when they're fighting, you've seen videos of them fighting. They
Yeah.
like that high pitch. Like I could replicate it, but it's gonna be pretty loud.
Go for it, dude. Go for it.
Like God, I'm nervous now, but like a like not. I'm not doing a good job of it,
But still, it's more of a high pitch, and it's
Yeah,
crazy
very.
because when we talk to Mike Bluler, who has probably I was in my opinion one of the most intense Bigfoot encounters I've ever heard, and probably the best one of the most detailed encounters as well. I call him the Bob Lazar Bigfoot because of his encounter. His name is Mike Bluler. He's on one of our episodes as well. He had talked about how when he was retreating back to his car, that he felt like another Bigfoot was chasing him or kind of shadowing him along the trees. And then once he got clear of it and he got to his truck, he heard a high pitch scream. He said almost like a panther, but at this point, he's farther away from it, and it had kind of a whip sound at the end, like "Row!" You know what I mean? So one of the theories is that what he heard, and maybe what you heard, was a female, and that's
what I think personally.
that's the noise a female makes. That it can get into that high pitch sound. The sound that a female makes, I've heard, sounds like that, or like a crying baby as well. And so the fact that you heard a high-pitched sound tells me that may have been a female, probably defending her young or her family. Which
That's
is
exactly
crazy
what
to think
we thought.
about. Yeah,
That's
incredible.
Identical. It sounds so much like a chimpanzee that, like, if you put them side by side, they would have to have almost identical sound signatures.
Yeah.
The only thing was it was slightly deeper in tone, maybe like just a tiny bit. But I've always thought it was a female too.
Yeah, no, I think it was, but obviously I don't know for sure, but based on everything I've learned and heard about Bigfoot, to me it sounds like that was a female, and so there may have been young nearby, which is why maybe she didn't even show herself, because she just wanted to get you guys to be aware of her presence, and then she was going to take off.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I know that there's a cave in that area not too far from there.
There you go.
So, and I've always kind of thought that they definitely use caves. I mean, why wouldn't they? If they need shelter, it's readily available shelter. No, not a lot of people go in caves. Like, there's ample habitat.
Absolutely, and when you think about, they recently did a study on the Neanderthals, and they had learned that, not only were they cave dwellers, they found signs that they were actually burying their dead. And
I saw that.
And so if you have Neanderthal who, eventually died off, if you have that species burying their dead, similar to what, later, Homo sapiens, or I think it's Homo sapiens sapiens, would do, to me, it's not that far-fetched to make the conclusion that Sasquatch does the same thing with their dead.
Yeah, no.
They bury their dead, or they eat their dead, or, as we know, anything that dies in the forest does not last very long.
No, it doesn't at all.
It's not like they're dying. It'd be one thing if Bigfoots go and they die in an alley in New York City. Then that's a little different. It's going to take a while for anything to take care of that.
The rats would probably get them in New York pretty quick.
They probably would. But you know what I mean, though. Like the forest
No,
will
absolutely.
inhale whatever's left there, and so, and when you talk about even going back to, and this is not even Bigfoot, but like when you look at the structures that were built in like Mesoamerica, you know, you have these huge pyramids that were built, and then once the native population either died off or left, the nature just took it over.
Yeah, in no time flat.
In no time. And if we're talking, you know, sometimes we're talking like hundreds of years, and it's been covered up. Now we're talking about an animal that's decomposing in a forest filled with other living creatures. It's going to happen even faster than that. So yeah, I mean, to me, I think that these things bury their dead, or they consume their dead. They do something with their fallen family members, and
I would have
it's
to agree.
incredible. Yeah.
There's a study done, and I think it was like one of the body farms or whatever that they do the decomposition, where they stake it down, and it was less than a week before the body was completely gone and just a few scattered bones left.
Yeah.
And
Because,
in some cases even faster than that with predation.
Well, and there's been stories too that you know, where the Bigfoots have been shot. There was a story not just recently where these two boys were hunting, and they came across a Bigfoot, and one of the kids yelled, you know, "Stop, or I'm going to shoot you!" And he shot him at least 3 or 4 times in the chest. And they went back there the next day, and it wasn't even there, which means that it probably got away. It got up and ran off, and then it went somewhere and died, or went back to where the rest of its family was at, and they took care of it. But these things are not easy to bring down. I mean, even with a 22, it may have not brought it down. Who knows?
I don't think we would have had a chance, as large as it sounded to me. Because a 22 caliber is fine for squirrels, but I had a buddy who back in the day, and when he was desperate, they went to try and poach a deer and shot it in the head with a 22 Magnum, and the deer woke up while they were carrying it.
Holy cow.
And kicked the shit out of one of the other guys that was with them. So their skulls are thick, and that's a deer, and their skulls are nothing compared to what a large primate skull would be.
Yeah.
So I don't think we would have had a chance against it. If it charged us, we'd have been done.
Well, and it makes me wonder too. Like you say that it was beating its chest, and that's not something that you hear too often about Bigfoot. But
no, and I know.
No, I'm saying like you don't hear it that often. But what I'm saying is that like I think that's still fascinating that it did that, because it's a primate thing to do.
Very much so.
And so I can't imagine every encounter they're going to do that, but you know, there are things that, you know, that animals do that is a callback or like a, you know, something that's similar to what other species of themselves do. And so I think that was really interesting that it did that. And maybe it's something it doesn't always do, but instinctually it knew to do that.
That's what I think too, and that's why I think that it was protecting its young.
Yeah,
and that's why it was such an aggressive response and such a baser instinct almost.
Absolutely. After you guys left the encounter, what was that like?
I honestly don't remember the rest of the day. Like, I don't remember going home. I barely remember walking out of the woods. I remember like thinking that it was really, really quiet, but we didn't run, but because we were trying to like watch behind us and like make sure that nothing was sneaking up on us. But like, we never talked about it again. And like, it was just recently, a couple years ago, I ran into the guy, Ross, one of the guys that was with me. And he's a police sheriff now. And I asked him, and he doesn't remember it at all. But he did go into Afghanistan and Iraq. And I don't know if he was on, you know, official police duty, if he wanted to avoid talking about it completely. But when I talked to Matt Knapp, I didn't remember that the other friend, Alex, at a party a couple years later, probably about 10 or 12 years ago. I ran into him at a party and I asked him if he remembered that day, and he said, "What was that?" And I said it had to be a Bigfoot. Like, but he's like, I haven't talked to either of them hardly since. We kind of just lost touch since high school, but um, we never even talked about it. I don't remember anything on the ride home or anything of the rest of that day. It was like almost like the like the memory wiper from Men in Black, like completely gone. And it was probably 10 years later I really put two and two together when I was with my friend. We were watching Finding Bigfoot or something like that, and I was like, that's exactly like when they were talking about a bluff charge, and I was like, that's exactly what happened to me. And it never really dawned on me. I don't know why, and or why we never talked about it.
Well, let me
But
ask you, when you were at the party and you asked your friend about that encounter, he said, "What was that?" And you said, "Dude, it was a Bigfoot." What was his response?
that's literally what he thought too. But he like never really like he said that he never thought about it, like what it could have been. But he did definitely remember the encounter.
Are you looking to jumpstart your small business? Then check out Power Brand Systems. They offer one platform that centralizes all of your social media interactions and pulls together all your reviews from either Facebook or Google. They even have plans in which they will handle all of your social media interactions to help boost your small business into the future. Guys, if you're looking to propel your small business, please check out Power Brand Systems. Use the referral code in the description below when making your first purchase of Power Brand Systems. And on top of that, use promo code 300POWER to save up to $300 on your first purchase of Power Brand Systems. Propel your small business today. Well, man, that's an incredible story. And the fact that you guys stood your ground and got back to back with your weapons in order to defend yourself. To me, I mean, that takes balls, dude. You should be, honestly, like, not everyone would have done that. Some people just would have started firing or just would have ran off. You guys actually got in a position to defend yourselves, and I think that's awesome, man.
I was kind of like out of a like a war movie is how I remember it. Like,
Yeah.
like or like horror movies where some monsters chasing people and they stand back to back to try and fight them off. That's like what it felt like.
That, dude, that's just crazy. So Nick, let me ask you, because we ask almost every guest this question: what is a Bigfoot? What do you think it really is?
Well, I have a couple of theories. Like, I think that there's merit to it being a large primate, like a Gigantopithecus left over.
Mm-hmm.
There's also potential merit to it being a, a relative or like a hybrid being between a large primate and humans. I think that kind of explains why there's so many stories of people being kidnapped and stuff like that. But if you look into the Sumerian clay tablets, the description of Enkidu is almost identical to what Bigfoot is described as. So my theory is that I'm not like, I don't think the entire earth is hollow, but I think there's definitely underground civilizations that may still exist. And I think they're essentially like the security guards for the Watchers, is my theory.
Well, we had on Darcy Weir, who's the director of multiple Bigfoot documentaries and UFO documentaries, and one of the things he talks about from his new film, which was this one right here, Transmedium Fast Movers and USOs, is that he talked about the possibility of another species living in the deep parts of the ocean, similar to the abyss but more advanced. Now, obviously, there was speculation that could actually be extraterrestrials that are living in our oceans, because that'd be the best way to hide yourself. But what if what we're seeing is the ones that are living in the oceans are actually another species that lives in the deep parts of the world, in the deep parts of the ocean, and that's why they look the way they look, and that's why their ships are kind of bioluminescent, self-illuminating, because that's what they need to do in the deep parts of the water in order to see where they're going or to kind of see one another. And so the idea that the Sasquatch, Bigfoots could be a creature that lives underground or comes from the underground world. It doesn't shock me. I mean, we hear stories about the Nephilim, and we hear stories about big, huge giants that once lived. These creatures have been around all through time and through Native American culture as well. And so I really do believe that at one point there was many Native Americans that coexisted with the Bigfoot. And over time, as European settlers came through and war came through, the Sasquatches basically made the decision to move back and out of the way of where humans were living.
Well, the I think it's the Tlingit or the Inuit tribes say that they followed the hairy man north to where they live now. You have all the stories of Mount Shasta and Mount Rainier having a civilization living inside of it, and you have massive amounts of Bigfoot encounters on both of those mountains. I read a story recently about a place in the Himalayas where a guy climbed up this mountain and he was solo climbing, and when he got to like a portion of the summit, he started feeling really weird, like getting sick, and then he passed out and he woke up at the bottom of the mountain unharmed.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that like, and then you have like Mount Meru, and there's mountains all over the world that have stories of civilizations inside of them or beings living on like inside of them. And at almost every one of these places, you have stories of Bigfoot or the Yeti or woodwose, or just the stories are like seem to be very interconnected in my opinion. Like, and especially if you take into account that that's where the Hopi Indians said that their ant friends came up from underground and saved them from the four great cataclysms. Like that would, and then you connect that with the clay tablets. The Hopi word for ant is Anu, and the Hopi word for friend is Naki. So the Anunnaki came up from underground, saved them, and then you compare that with the clay tablets that have the Anunnaki having a being, the like Enkidu, who's supposed to be Enki's son, but he's a crossbreed, but he's like a giant furry man. Like, and then you have stories of them living in the mountains or underground, and you have Bigfoots discovered or being sighted by these exact places. Like, I think it's not a stretch at all to think that they're the Nephilim or some form of it.
Yeah, I think that they're a branch off of the Nephilim, but I think back when they were first came into existence, I think they may have been a little bit more sophisticated because they were surrounded by more advanced beings all the way around. But then, as these advanced Anunnaki left the world, left our planet, then or in your case, you're talking about receded further into our planet. But I feel like they left our planet, and when they did, these species were able to kind of run free, and then they just kind of became what they are now. While Homo sapiens or Homo sapiens sapien, after the Anunnaki put their essence into our species, we were able to kind of flourish and kind of live off of what we learned from them to kind of become what we are now. Because when you look at ancient Egypt and you look at the different parts of the world in Iraq where the Sumerians once lived, I mean, it really does feel like we may have been dealing with a much more advanced civilization at one point. And then after, a series of cataclysms and, of course, the Anunnaki leaving, human beings basically had to start over again and kind of find themselves and become what we are now. But I feel like when you look at the pyramids in Egypt, the Sphinx, all of that, I believe all of that was already there, and that they rediscovered that and then made it their home. And that's why Egypt had, their own Hall of Records where they had a vast amount of historical content that happened in our world. Now all that is lost. And I think if they were to find that, if there was a chamber, let's say inside or underneath the Sphinx that had their Hall of Records, I feel like that information would be suppressed because they don't want, the powers that be don't want people to know what the true past was, because that takes more reprogramming, and that's something that they do not want us to know and want to deal with.
Well, and that would crush every major religion overnight. And there's
Big time.
trillions, or they've made billions and billions and billions of dollars off of people's indoctrination, so to speak. I mean, even if you look at the Bible, like the resurrection was added 4 or 5 centuries after Jesus died.
Yeah.
But they took out the book of Enoch. They took out, there's 18 other books in the Ethiopian Bible that don't exist in the modern day Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Hell wasn't a thing. What was a thing is reincarnation was a thing in the original Bible. A lot of people don't know that. Like they've profited off of the corruption of the story. And the entire story of the Bible is literally in the clay tablets. Like every bit of it is in the clay tablets and more.
Mm.
And I think, I'm not to say that I'm like not Christian or that I don't believe in any of it, but if I'm going to believe in any of it, I'm going to look at the oldest version that we have, and that's the clay tablets. It's 3,000 years older than the Bible, and there's so much in it that just it brings all the pieces together that you don't get from the other portions of it. I think they obscure that because if we knew, they'd be out of work and they'd be out of control.
Absolutely. When you look at the like the emerald tablets, some people would argue, oh well, if these species were so advanced and they had all this technology, why would they be carving them into stone? I think what they did was human beings did that as a way to keep a record of what was happening in their world, because not everyone had access to an actual like version of like an iPad that the Anunnaki had, their technology that they had. So they had to write it in their own way so that they were able to keep record, because I'm sure at that point, they even thought to themselves, like, people need to know what happened. People need to know what was happening here on this world before it's lost forever. And, storytelling has been a hallmark of human civilization. And so there was definitely those that would record and document what was happening in our world in order to pass those stories along. And a lot of those, like the Emerald tablets and the other tablets that we're talking about, a lot of them were buried. Dead Sea Scrolls buried in the ground, because they knew that if these were found in the time that they existed, that they'd be destroyed. And so it begs the question, why would they why would they hide those? Why would they bury them? Because they wanted to ensure that this information made it to the future. And when you look at the Emerald tablets and in some of the work of Billy Carson, I mean, talking about how the Anunnaki were here, how they, that they were here for thousands of years, and then a war broke out. But before the war could actually get underway, they decided, hey, let's use a species that's already here, add our essence to them, and make them be the worker that we're looking for. And that all of that makes so much more sense when you put it in the context of a advanced scientific civilization that we are now. If you're looking at one that existed thousands of years ago, they would do the same exact thing. Yeah, if they could do that, they would genetically engineer human beings to be not only a worker, but to have that God gene where they were programmed to follow the orders of the God, which is the Anunnaki, so that way we don't turn on them. But at the same time, what does that do in the long run? I think what that does is it creates the need for human beings to have a leader. There's always a group of humans and then a leader that we follow by. And we all sort of have that mentality when we get into groups. And I think a lot of that is because if the Emerald Tablets are true, then we're programmed to act and work that way when we're in a group or a civilization.
And well, I agree with that 100%. There's even a scientist recently that discovered that there's a gene that is programs our gold lust. Like there's actually a gene that is describing our lust to find gold, and that's what they were said to have come here for. I mean, exactly. That right there just screams genetic manipulation. And there's a 40,000 year gap in our evolution up to that point that we jumped from cave dwellers to making tools and doing things like the stone vases in Egypt that are like that we can barely replicate today.
Yeah.
And there's an obvious loss of the technology. Like to build something like Puma Punku or Sexy Woman, to build something like that, and then to go to clay or to living back in sticks or in mud huts and with hunting with sticks doesn't make sense unless the people who had that technology left with it.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that, people would say, well, if there was an advanced civilization here, then you would have, remnants of the technology left over. Not necessarily. And on top of that, it feels like the species that was here may have been the Anunnaki, it may have been another species from the the Orion Belt, whoever they were. It felt like their form of technology is, we're going to manipulate the natural organic material that's here, as opposed to we're going to make steel and make buildings and make structures. It looked like they tried to use the natural materials that were here and use them in a more natural way to create these structures. And you'll see, like I think it's at Puma Punku, those kind of M-shaped blocks that, like, how in the world they made that, I don't know. And then even in Egypt and in Latin America, you see these circular drilled holes that are absolutely perfect, and there's no way that we could do that without some kind of diamond drill. And the fact that they were able to do it is incredible.
Yeah, Christopher Dunn did the study, and Flinders Petrie originally did it, and their drilling technology was 500 or 50 times better than ours is today. And like, I grew up working in carpentry and I've done stonework and all that stuff. We simply cannot do that without diamond carbide or hardened steel. And they supposedly didn't have that. That doesn't make sense to me. The technology doesn't devolve unless there's something that happens that's so monumentally destructive, like a great flood or a great tsunami or an asteroid impact, that all of that stuff is just wiped away. I think if we really wanted to find out what was in the past, we need to be looking like the mouth of the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Like, what's there underneath 500 feet of dirt? What's at just off the coastlines? And there's discoveries that prove that there were civilizations there before the water rose.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think of what a 1,000-foot tall wall of water would do to the surface of the earth, there would be nothing left of our society. Everything would be gone. It would be rubble.
Well, and it makes you wonder too, if we know about the Younger Dryas. It was likely an asteroid impact, but if we go even further back, I mean, let's say there's an advanced civilization living here. It's the Anunnaki, and they've spread across the world, enriching different civilizations and also spreading the civilization as well, and teaching them new languages so that it creates a division between human beings, so they can't work together. But once they knew that something was coming, let's say they knew an asteroid was coming that was going to devastate this world, there may have been a huge debate over, do we destroy the asteroid, do we divert it, or do we let it just naturally happen? And if they made that decision, they would then decide, okay, we have until, it's coming in the next few days, we need to get out of here now. And then they basically left. And then left human beings to sort of fend for themselves. And I'm sure they probably took a number of us with them. But in essence, they really just left and said, goodbye and good luck. And based on the devastation that was left behind, they probably made the decision to move on somewhere else. And wherever that is, I don't know.
I would have to agree with that 100%. And that's even what it says in all of our myths. All of our ancient myths say that the only people that survived were high up in the mountains, or there's a few people from this society. And there's the stories they're all the same all across the planet. They're always this destruction. Somebody gave them foreknowledge. In the Sumerians, it's Enki. In the South American sightings, it's like Viracocha or Quetzalcoatl. I can't remember which one, but that somebody gave them knowledge that it was going to happen, and only a few of us survived. Only a small population of us survived. And if you look at where, like, what the maps of the destruction show, Africa was one of the only places that wasn't really hit that heavily because of the high coastline. And so, if we, out of Africa theory fits perfectly into that.
Yeah, no, it really does. I think the history of our world goes much deeper than we've ever really known, and I think that the Emerald Tablets give you a lot of information about that. I think that the fact that you have these megalithic structures that are built with the symmetry that has never been seen before, built with mathematics that correlate to different, to the size of the Earth, to the medium height of all of the mountains and high points in the world. It's incredible to see how much information actually is within the design and the mathematics that come along with the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids around the world. It's almost as if a more sophisticated, more intelligent species that developed these and that built these structures had that in mind. Say, hey, we also are going to have these mathematical equations kind of built into it to help speak to us, or whatever comes in the future, that we were here and this is something that we knew about. There was a lot of planning and kind of foresight put into the construction of these megalithic structures. And when you look at the structures that are built now, I mean, now it's a lot different. They're talking about steel. They're talking about, making these, these buildings, these high rises, but nothing has this level of sophistication in terms of the amount of mathematics that is embedded into the creation of the Great Pyramid. That it doesn't happen like that anymore. And so I think that you're looking at an advanced species that help build these things to communicate with, themselves, if not us, in the future. But because the fact that these cataclysms happen the way they did, it sort of stunted that idea and left us kind of where we are now.
I would have to agree with that 100%. I think that I think that everything that they left, everything that survived was intentional. Like, I think that all of their measurements were intentional. The placement, the alignment with the stars, the correlation with the equator and the size of the Earth, and all that stuff is encoded in these artifacts that are left behind. And I think, I kind of wonder if there wasn't some of those major structures weren't built right after the first part of the Younger Dryas to try and survive what they knew was coming the second time around. And that kind of would make sense to me. But like, there's just it makes perfect sense. It makes more sense than the mainstream archaeological perspective that's being proven wrong more and more every day with discoveries like the footprints and the white sands that are 22,000 years old. The discoveries at Bluefish Cave and the Topper site, they all prove that the modern archaeological narrative is wrong. And a lot of that has to do with the Smithsonian. There was one of the directors of the Smithsonian he hated religion. He hated Christianity, he hated religion. So he literally had, it was as part of their policy. And this is all well documented. That it was part of their policy to suppress things that supported the religious narratives or the ancient scriptures, which is like, that's why all the giant bones have been stashed away. That's why they're suppressing the evidence of Bigfoot, suppressing the evidence of the UFOs. It's all because they don't want to lose control of their narrative. They don't want to lose control they don't want to lose power.
Well, and the other thing too to think about is that they may have the powers that be, may have the knowledge of what occurred on this planet thousands of years ago. And so their entire belief is that we will not and we cannot let another species dominate us the way they did, we're going to be the ones that are in charge. We'll be the ones that dictate what happens to our species in our planet. But in turn, that's turned into something that has become more of way of debunking actual knowledge, putting out false information, propaganda, all these horrible things that I think that it's kind of evolved into. Because now you have a generation of these families of these corporations that are now doing it out of pure greed, out of pure, they don't want to lose their power, they don't want to lose their seat at the high table, and so I think the message has gotten lost, and I think that human beings, I think, are almost set up for a wake up call if extraterrestrials ever decided to openly show themselves to the rest of the world. And I think that that's what would rock everything that we stand on. And I think that religion would crumble if extraterrestrials were to ever reveal themselves, because so many people in this world, their lives are built around their religion. And that's fine. Like, I have no problems with that. I have family that are very religious as well. But I think that the announcement or the realization that we are not alone, let alone imagine the realization if another species that were living inside the earth or in the deep parts of the ocean revealed themselves, knowing that there's been another species, an advanced species living on this planet with us that we had no idea, except for maybe certain parts of the government or whatnot. That would rock everything. Extraterrestrial would be worse in terms of like the devastation it would cause in terms of mass hysteria. But I think that when you look at Bigfoot, I think that if that is something that is exposed as being a living and breathing species that is recognized, then it opens the door for so many other stories and myths and conspiracy theories, because now they know, hey, if this is real, what else is real, and what else have we been lied to about? And then it opens that door that the powers that be just do not want opened.
I would agree 100%. I think it's essential for them to keep control, because they stand to lose the most out of anybody. Whether that's I don't think it's a good thing that the way that they're doing things. I mean, with Tesla's technology being suppressed and like all this other stuff, all the different free energy technologies that have been killed, and the people who created them disappeared or completely discredited. It's all about greed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, and normally I don't like talking about politics, and I try to avoid that on any of my channels. But I think that in this day and age that you were dealing with a group of people, families that don't want to lose their seat at the high table. And that's sad, because it's a way of keeping everyone in under their control. However, I feel like eventually something is going to happen. I feel like a form of disclosure is eventually going to happen, because you can only suppress the truth for so long before it catches up with you. I mean, what happens today when a private company starts launching ships into space and they have encounters with extraterrestrials or UFOs? You can't hide that anymore. Like, you have to come forward, because okay, now we have civilians flying around. Now what are we going to do? You go back to the early 19th century, the 1800s, 1700s. It was much easier to debunk and put out false information to sort of suppress that kind of thing. But this day and age, it's going to be even more difficult as we move forward. And so we'll see how that kind of evolves out. But Nick, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story. I thought your story was completely chilling. I mean, I cannot imagine having something that big come charging at you in the woods and not knowing what it is. And to be able to survive that and to tell your story, I think is commendable, and it is just a crazy, crazy encounter. So thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. It does help, to be honest with you, because it was a very traumatic incident, and it kept me out of the woods for a few years, even, to be honest with you. So thank you again.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. It was my pleasure to have you on here. We'll have to do it again because, I mean, as you can tell, we can probably talk about this stuff for another 2 hours. but for the sake of the podcast, we're out of time for today. But I'll definitely reach out to you, and then I'll even give you the link to our community where you can become a member of our community where we post stories and information on there as well. So I'd love to have you on there. I'll give you that link. I'll email it to you so you can do that as well. But Nick, like I said, thank you so much for coming on here. We've been reaching out to a lot of different people to have guests on the show, and to have a viewer reach out to us and be able to come on here the way you did, it makes me at least feel that, what we're doing is something that's good and that helps people, because telling these stories and being able to relive these experiences, I think helps not only your spirit, your soul, but it helps everyone learn more about the things that are out there in our world.
Agreed. And next time we have to talk about UFOs, because I have a couple of good stories about that too.
Oh,
Very strange encounters too. So, but
no, we
thank you very much.
definitely will. All right, Nick, you have a nice night, and good night to everybody else as well listening at home.
Happy 4th of July too, by the way.
Absolutely, happy 4th of July, buddy. We'll talk to you next time. If you have a story that you would like to share with us on our podcast, please reach out to us at beyondxunknown@gmail.com. Paranormal, unexplained, UFO, or Bigfoot, reach out to us and share your story.